Welcome to the Upshot Interview Series. This is episode 24, and I am your host, Josh Mansfield. Charlie is still out on vacation today, so he is excused, and we'll be back tomorrow for our regular program Thursday show to preview the Preserve. But in the meantime, I had the opportunity to sit down with Holyn Handley, a relatively newcomer to the tour who has been making some waves this season. She throws a mile and only began playing just a couple of years ago and went from playing rec in 2020 to being on the Pro Tour with top 5 finishes in 2022. We talk about her life on tour, how she converted from being a volleyball player to now a disc golfer, what her sponsorship process looked like, and what lessons look like for both her as a coach and for the future of the Disc Golf Pro Tour. It's a great interview. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned. You're listening to The Upshot.
The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. And you know what? They make more than just disc golf bags. Check out their new Fly Pack. You can find it on the website, pounddiscgolf.com. It is the maximum carry-on size travel pack that you've been looking for. Backpack straps, or you can take those off and convert it into a duffel. It's got room for a laptop, a tablet, your clothes, your stuff, and you know what? Some disc golf discs, because obviously you're going to bring some on vacation. $299.99, and it's just a beautiful bag. You got to check it out. It's available in multiple colorways. Go to pounddiscgolf.com to check out the Fly Pack so that you can travel in style.
Joining me now on the Upshot Interview Series is Holyn Handley. Holyn, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You know, you have had a season that I think has excited a lot of people. You've had some really incredible finishes on the Pro Tour this season, and you know, I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to talk a little bit more about your background, how you got into the game, and allow people to get to know you. So, starting off, what is your athletic background prior to disc golf?
Yeah, so before disc golf, I played volleyball for about 10 years, starting in middle school all the way through college. I played Division III NCAA volleyball. And then around the time I graduated, I actually really got into powerlifting. And so I competed in that for maybe, I want to say 2 or 3 years, and then picked up disc golf.
Okay. So, you know, volleyball, we hear sometimes of like ultimate frisbee players who cross over. Volleyball is not the most natural crossover into disc golf. So would you say that besides just the athleticism itself, is there any crossover between volleyball and disc golf that you have found to be a valuable skill set that's transferred between sports?
Yeah, I think for the most valuable thing has probably been sidearm, because the way you snap a disc is actually pretty similar to the way that you snap your wrist when you're hitting a volleyball. Just dialing it in, you know, to the side instead of overhead has taken some work. I think general athleticism helps because I am completely self-taught in disc golf. So like kind of having that body awareness and that ability to look at what I'm doing and know what I want to be doing and, you know, get from point A to point B. I think that's a skill, you know, I picked up playing volleyball and other sports. Sure. The backhand footwork was actually really hard for me though, because in volleyball, when you're right-handed, you go left, right, left, and you turn to the right, and then you jump and you hit the ball. But then to throw a backhand in disc golf, it's the opposite. It's right and then left and then right, and then you turn to the left, and it was a whole thing trying to get my footwork to work.
So how did you get into disc golf, and when did you start playing? I know, according to your PDGA page, your first tournament was in 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So how did you find the sport?
So my boyfriend actually found it online. We had been kind of sort of playing catch in the park here and there, badly playing catch with like frisbees in the park. And we were kind of looking for something outdoorsy to do, because at this point we were both working. Our hobbies were all indoor hobbies. We were looking for something to get us kind of outdoors. And so he came across disc golf and was like, hey, it's like, it's not a thing that requires us to like run or like be super athletic outside, but it would get us outside, and it's throwing frisbees, which is something we're kind of into anyway. And so we just went over to Dick's Sporting Goods, and he bought me my first starter pack, which was just the Innova starter pack, leopard, shark, and aviar. And there's a little like 9-hole pitch and putt course that was about 20 minutes away from where we were living. And so that was my very first time playing disc golf. And I actually have video from that day. So I know that the exact day was October 1st of 2019.
Okay. So this is October 1st, 2019. You are a pre-pandemic player then. Just barely.
Yeah, so my first tournament was actually like the weekend before the pandemic and all like the shutdowns and stuff started. Yeah.
Got it. So a couple of follow-up questions with that story then. Do you remember what video or what on YouTube your boyfriend found that got you guys into disc golf?
I don't know the exact video. I want to say it was a Jomez video.
Okay.
Which it would make sense because then, because shortly after, we started getting hooked, I was watching all of the Jomez videos. So it was probably a Jomez.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. I'm always curious, like when people from outside go looking or stumble into disc golf, what is it in the YouTube algorithms that gets them into it? So it's a question I always love to ask. So my second question then is, during COVID, was disc golf a big hobby for you and your boyfriend, just given the inability to do other things?
Yeah, definitely. So he already worked from home pre-pandemic, and then I only worked from home for maybe 2 months before I was deemed essential and had to go back into the office. But we couldn't do anything. We couldn't even go to courses for the longest time. So what we would do, we had a practice basket, and we would just take a bunch of discs in the practice basket, and we would go out to the local field or the local park and just set up like safari holes. So we would set up a hole, and we would be like, we would make a game out of it of like, you throw 5 and then you get to go from your best 3. And like, we would make like a putting competition out of it. So it kind of just turned into, we couldn't go play. So we just did a lot of field work. Yeah. During the shutdown.
Awesome. So, I mean, I find this fascinating because, you went from playing in recreational women to now on the tour full time in the span of 2 years, less than really 2 years. At what point did you realize, wow, I'm actually really good at this sport and could do something good with this?
That's tough because like I was pretty terrible to begin with. I think almost everybody is. And it, when I started trying to get good, it was never with the intention of going on tour or even getting sponsored or even necessarily playing in the pro division. I just wanted to be able to throw better. I'm able to see how the pros are throwing and how good they are. And I'm like, there's no reason I shouldn't be able to throw the disc pretty far if I have good form. And so, I kind of just dove into that. I figured out a really good process for like practicing and for getting better. And then I started doing like amateur tournaments and was pretty quickly the best amateur in my area. And then once I started getting some rated rounds that were over 900, I decided to move up. And then, 2021 came around, and there weren't really any events in California because we were still largely shut down. But I saw that there was one in Arizona in January. And so me and my friend, I texted my friend, was like, hey, do you want to go play this? And so we went out to Arizona. It was the Maricopa Open, which I ended up winning, which is, where I got on the map because Katrina Allen and Jennifer Allen were both there, and Terry Miller, the disc golf guy, was there and filming. And, after that weekend, I had sponsors calling me. I had my Instagram blowing up a little bit. And so, yeah, it kind of just all snowballed. I don't think there was any one point where I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. It was just, I got so focused on like slowly getting better. I kind of looked up and was like, oh, hey, I'm actually like kind of good at this.
So you win the Maricopa Open and you start getting calls from sponsorships. What was that process like when you were, taking the different sponsors and making your decision to eventually be, go with your sponsor that you've chosen, which is Dynamic Discs, correct?
Yeah. So it was the best problem in the world to have, that I didn't know who to pick because I just didn't know enough about the space and the business side of things and the reputations of all the companies. Because, I could find people who had good and bad things to say about every company that was talking to me. So it was actually really difficult to pick. And it was actually, I told everybody I'm going to go to the Las Vegas Challenge. I'm going to play with my open bag because I didn't really want to try to switch bags right before. And I said I would make my decision after. And I was actually talking to Zoe Andyke, who was on my card for one of the rounds, and telling her everybody that was interested in me and what the different deals, the different offers were. And she was the one who recommended I go Dynamic Discs. And I took her at her word because she was someone who had been sponsored by them, had left that company, and still thought very, very highly of them, that they were good people. And then, talking to Eric McCabe, I just went off of vibes. I just got a really good feeling about them. And they were one of the better offers. And so I just kind of went with my gut.
How much dynamic discs or Trilogy plastic did you throw prior to signing and being sponsored by them?
Let's see. So when I had my open bag, I putted with Maidens, which is West Side, and I threw Pures and Harps, which are both Latitude and West Side. I think at the time I was throwing EMAC Truths. But that was probably it, because a lot of my fairway drivers were Innova. Distance drivers, I was throwing the X3 from Prodigy. And I had a little bit of Discraft and some Infinite and some other stuff sprinkled in there. So maybe like a quarter of my bag was Trilogy before.
Was it a hard transition for you, or do you think that because of your limited time in playing the sport, you felt like the transition to a purely dynamic disc bag or just Trilogy bag wasn't too bad?
It wasn't too bad. The only thing that was a little challenging is that the way that the rate at which plastic beats in is a little different for all of the companies. So when I initially got what EMAC had recommended for me, because I just sent him a list of everything I threw and he sent me a box, everything was too overstable. And so I ordered like more understable stuff, but then you find out like, okay, 3 weeks in, now I need the more stable stuff. So like learning that was a little tricky. And then coming on tour, stuff beats in even faster because you're throwing way more often. So that's really been the only challenge. Yeah, because I mean, I think there's enough discs in the Trilogy lineup that you can find what you need. It's hard to do that when you have so many options almost.
Sure. So in 2021, you attended about a half a dozen tournaments on tour. And at this point, are you still working? Because I remember hearing an interview, you were an engineer, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, what kind of engineering did you do?
So my degree's in biomedical engineering, and I was working as a process engineer. So we were basically, our team was in charge of the rubber injection molding plant, so rubber components for medical devices. So my job was basically, supporting manufacturing. If there's a problem on the floor, going out and figuring out what that problem is, also researching, implementing, and validating new processes or changes to processes, all that fun stuff.
Got it. Okay. So in 2021, were you still working at that position?
Yes. So I left that company in November of 2021.
And you did so in order to make the decision to go on tour full time in 2022?
Kind of. So the way we made the decision, is so we were actually planning at the beginning of 2021. We were wanting to move back to Texas. So we were living in California at the time. And we wanted to move back to Texas to be closer to family. So we were already planning at the end of the year when our lease was up to move. And so around October, November is when I was looking for jobs. But that was also when Dynamic Discs, sent me their offer for the next year. And this was based off of the plan was originally, we're going to move, and then I'm probably going to do the same number of events I did the year before. Kind of same old. But then the offer they gave me was almost enough to like go on tour and do it full time. And as I've been practicing and I'm picking up some more wins, I'm starting to get really good and know that I can like hang with the best. It was hard to kind of put my heart into the job search. So it's kind of looking for the job and quitting the job and having this offer from Dee and kind of wondering, like, could I make a go of it? Like, this would be kind of the time to do it since we're going to move anyway. And so I called Eric and I was like, hey, if I tour full time, like, what would you guys give me? And they immediately upped their offer. They asked if there was anything else I needed. And, I talked to my boyfriend about it. We figured out how I can make a truck and trailer work, and just decided to go for it, and if I'm going to do it for this year and reevaluate at the end of the year. And if it's horrible, I'll just, go get an engineering job in Austin. Not a problem. And if it's great and I'm able to swing it, then I'll just keep doing it.
So mid-season check-in, then how do you feel like the tour has been then relative to your expectations?
Yeah, so I didn't have a ton of expectations. If anything, I expected touring in the truck and trailer to be a little bit more difficult, knock on wood. But so far it's been pretty smooth, traveling from place to place. I just finished what's probably going to be the longest drive of the year, coming from Bailey up to Clearwater. And that went okay. And it's actually been pretty comfortable living in the RV by myself. And then as for, my performance on the course, I've been kind of loving every minute of it. And I've been doing really well. So I think, if I can continue to finish out this season as strongly as I began the season, I think chances are good I'll be able to stay on tour.
Awesome. So you said you're traveling by yourself. Does that mean your boyfriend stayed back in Texas?
He traveled with me for the Jonesboro DDO swing, Dynamic Disc Open swing. And then for the Texas swing, he would be at home during the week and then come up for the weekends. But for this Midwest swing, he's, for the most part, staying at home. He's going to come out to Ledgestone and possibly one other one because he's going to play Ledgestone. But for the most part, yeah, he's at home.
Okay. So for traveling, what has it been like to try and you say it's been easier and a little more comfortable than you expected. I know some players will travel and kind of coordinate with other players at certain tournaments. They'll get Airbnbs when they're going to be in at a place for longer. Do you have a traveling group? What has that been like for you? And how has it been just kind of to adapt to, I guess, the social life in a way on tour as well?
Yeah, for the travel portion of it, I start by just reaching out to the TDs and asking, telling them what I have and asking if, we'll be allowed to, because some courses, they'll let us just camp at the course. Waco's a good example of that. So just finding out, if I can park at the course, and then if I can't do that, see if there's a host who has room for me and is willing to take me. And then if that doesn't work, I just go get a campground, because honestly, you can find a rustic campground for $20 a night. And sometimes they'll be even cheaper if you book for the whole week. So that's not too bad. That's generally cheaper than if I split an Airbnb with some people. So that's pretty much what I've been doing for lodging. And then as far as people I've been hanging out with, I hang out with Ella Hansen a bunch and Raven Klein a whole bunch. And then, for practice rounds, it's usually one of them or by myself, or I'll just kind of jump on with whoever happens to be starting at the same time.
Speaking of your travel schedule a little bit, I looked up for U.S. Women's registration, and I saw you are not registered for the U.S. Women's Championship. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I had promised a friend I would be a bridesmaid back before I had made the decision to tour. So I will be returning to Austin for some bridesmaids duties that weekend.
Okay, got it. I was really curious because it was one of the events you hit last year, and so I figured there had to have been a story. So do you intend on playing in, the playoff events? And right now you are qualified for the play-in tournament for the Pro Tour Championships. Do you intend on hitting that full East Coast swing?
Yeah, I'm missing U.S. Women's and I'm missing Des Moines. But I think with, the rest of the tour schedule, I have a pretty good chance, I think, of getting into that top 14 if I have some strong finishes. We'll see. And then, if I'm in the top 20, I'm definitely going to head over there and try to play into that tournament.
Okay. One of the things that I know that you are known for is distance.
Mm-hmm.
You throw far. And one debate that Charlie and I have had, and I know we've talked to a lot of people about, is about the question of distance versus putting and which of the skills, and you are, looking at your statistics, you're excellent in both. A lot of your driving statistics are in the top 10 according to UDisc, but you're still in the top 30 for putting and have a pretty good putting percentage as well. Do you feel like it's substantially easier to gain distance or to improve putting?
Easier to throw far.
And we can even say
putt.
for the general player.
Right.
Gaining that distance, right?
Right.
If you're said, I'm going to go out and I'm going to put 20 feet on my drive, or if you want to improve your putting percentage 5 percentage points, which one do you feel like is easier for the general population and why?
Putting 100%, just because like a lot of times, like the putting thing it's mental, right? Like once you build it's not hard to build a decent putting stroke. There's no like physical advantage, that you sometimes, I think with distance, like, the lankier, longer limbed people are going to have an easier time with distance. So there's nothing like that, I think, in putting. So, and I think also as a skill, it's just easier to be consistent about practicing, because that's really the thing with any skill, right? It's not one time you go out to a field for 4 hours and you suddenly get better. It's, are you able to go out to the field every week and practice consistently? So I think for putting, it's easier to be consistent with your putting practice. I also think for distance, it's really hard to know what you need to do to throw further. Right. So I think with putting, it's pretty obvious, you either need to put more spin on it, or you need to put a little higher, or you need to work on having a more consistent release point. It's a little more obvious what you need to do. But I think with distance, like a lot of people don't necessarily have that skill of like looking at a video of their form and seeing everything wrong with it, but knowing what to tackle first. So I'm going to say putting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you mentioned a couple of things throughout this interview. One, that you're self-taught in disc golf, really. And number two, a skill from volleyball is that you have been able to break down and really analyze what you're doing and how to improve it. Have you received any kind of coaching or lessons in your disc golf improvement? And what did those lessons focus on? If they go, let's start with that. Did you get any kind of lessons or coaching as you were kind of ascending into the professional level?
No, I've had 0 lessons for disc golf. 0 lessons.
0 lessons.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to tweak my question then. You said that you do give lessons. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
What do you focus on inside of those lessons in order to, because there's one thing about having a coach. I played hockey in high school, and having a hockey coach who you work with 3 times a week and is doing the same thing over and over and over, and they can watch you and watch that repetition. I'm sure for volleyball or any other athlete understands the same thing of working with that coach over a substantial period of time. When you give a lesson that's maybe 1 hour and you're never going to see that person again, what do you really try and focus on in that hour in order to help them improve the most?
Yeah, so my goal with an hour-long lesson is basically for them to walk away with a path forward toward improving whatever skill we worked on, right? So I will sit there and drill them for an extended period of time, on just 1 or 2 drills, but I'll also kind of basically give them the process to do it themselves so they can kind of coach themselves as they go forward. So we'll look at like a video of, say, their backhand form. And so I may look at it from the back and from the side view, and I'll show them, we'll go frame by frame in the video, and I'll show them like, hey, here are the things I think you need to work on. Maybe you've got A, B, and C areas for improvement. And I'll tell them, okay, well, we're going to start with A, and we're going to start with this drill. And then, I may show them the subsequent drills that they do when they master one part of it, just to give them an idea of what to do next. So the idea is that they'll do that hour-long lesson with me, and then they'll know what the next several weeks or even months need to look like for their practice.
So what do you think needs to be the steps or the future for professional disc golfers and coaching? Because I think it's clear we see from professional athletes that, even individual skill levels that, or from any given skill levels that, dedicated coaching to that sport makes them better, and it makes the sport better. So what would you like to see for the Disc Golf Pro Tour, for the PDGA, for touring pros in general, in order to kind of create a coaching infrastructure and atmosphere for professional players?
That's a good question. Yeah, because I mean, it is tough because right now most of the coaches, the really good coaches anyway, are touring pros. So we're not there to give week to week lessons unless it's in the off season. So I mean, if you were to keep that, it would have to be some kind of online lessons. I know like Scott Stokely does that. There's some other companies out there that do that. And then I think the other kind of path forward is as players start to age out and start to retire, um, if there is a big enough market for coaching, then, you know, you can make coaching like a secondary career after you're done playing. And I think up until maybe this point, that hasn't really been feasible. I don't think that prior to maybe the last 5 years or so, there just hasn't been enough demand for coaching. But as the sport becomes a viable option as a career, you're going to start to see coaching become a viable option as a career as kids coming up want to reach that professional level. They're going to start wanting coaching, and parents are going to want coaching. So I think that the growth of the two is kind of a symbiotic thing. As for what I would see like the Pro Tour or the PDGA do, like I think just like continue investing in the sport, continue putting more money and working on getting more eyes on the sport, because as there's more of that, then the coaching availability and quality is only going to get better as well.
So imagine a world, let's say Paige Pierce, for example, tomorrow says, I'm retiring from playing competitive disc golf. I've been hired by the Pro Tour, and I will just now be an available coach for any touring professional on the Disc Golf Pro Tour. Is that something that you would use? Is that something you think other pros would use? Or do you think it needs to be a world where, you know, someone like Paul Macbeth, who has the 10-year, $10 million contract, says, okay, I found this person who is going to be my coach, and I'm going to pay this coach to work with me in the off season, or, you know, what have you. What do you, for you as a professional, what do you think that world looks like?
Yeah, so I think in the first scenario, which would be a high-level pro retires and starts working for the PDGA as like everyone's coach, I don't know how well that would work, because that's a lot of people to try and give quality coaching to. Because, you know, if you think about team sports, individual sports, one coach is in charge of like a pretty small group of people. And to really give the kind of high-level attention to detail that we would need to be coached well at our level, I don't know that that's feasible. Now, the second scenario you said, where I sign a big contract, or Paul Macbeth signs a big contract, and now he can afford to hire someone to be his coach, I think that makes more sense. Because if the player's the one paying the coach is going to be highly, highly invested in that individual player. And then also, like, I can't imagine like two rival players like being okay with having the same coach. Like, I don't know if I could see like Paul and Ricky like being down to share a coach. You know what I mean? I don't know if I see that scenario happening. I mean, I think Paul's even said in interviews that he can't even see himself being at the same sponsor as Ricky at the same time. But so I don't know if that would work. If the PDGA and the DGPT like made that available, I don't know how many people would use it, if I'm being honest. Just because like I don't think that the high quality per player would be there. I don't think that's through the fault of the coach or anything like that. I think that's just the feasibility of it. But then also deciding like who gets access to that. Is it just like the tour card holders? Or is it, you know, people like me who aren't a tour card holder but are on tour full time? Like, where do you draw that line? I think that gets kind of tricky. So I think your latter scenario, where you might see like high level athletes starting to hire like mental coaches, or you know, someone like Gannon Burr, who's got like, he's so young, but he's got so much potential, where maybe like his family could afford to have someone coach him during his off seasons, or that sort of thing, and like develop him into the next like big player. Like, I think that's more feasible.
Yeah. I think the future of coaching is just one of those fascinating questions for disc golf, and when our sport reaches that point of both having players who can afford that and having the infrastructure of coaches that are readily available to be interested in that. I think it's a fascinating question. Last question for you, Holyn. Last two-part question. What has been your favorite tournament thus far on tour, and which tournament on tour tournament are you looking forward to most?
I think favorite so far has got to be OTB Open, just because, one, I thought the course was really, really well designed. It was a lot of fun to play. You got to kind of it looked like a bomber course, but I really don't think it was a bomber course. It was like, you did have to be strategic, a little bit less OB than artificial OB than we normally have, which for some reason throwing over like a string line feels like almost gimmicky, but throwing into a lake doesn't. I don't know. So there's some of that, but then also just like OTV did a great job of creating like a fun atmosphere for the players. You know, there was stuff going on at the shop all the time. We had like the concert and all the vending and all that stuff. So it was just a really fun atmosphere to be in, you know, from the playing side and then also from, you know, activities, that sort of thing. Like the players' party was super fun. It was free escape room and free axe throwing all night. Like that was super cool. And then, yeah, I guess also it was one of the first ones where I really started being like social. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. And then I think the one I'm looking forward to the most, that's tough. I'm really looking forward to like the Northeast swing. So playing like Green Mountain and, MVP, because I haven't really been to that part of the country and it looks really cool and people have really awesome things to say about both of those courses. So
okay, awesome. I lied. I actually have one more question that I want to ask you.
Great.
How high do you think your ceiling is?
I don't spend any time thinking about that, because I think the sport is still too young to say where anyone's ceiling is, really. And I think if I were to try and guess, like, I would be artificially putting a limit on myself. So I'm going to not answer that because I don't know and I don't want to know.
I think it was a great answer. You know, I think you're an ascendant player who's been exciting to watch. And Holyn, it has been a pleasure to have you here on the Upshot. Thank you so much for your time and wish you nothing but the best of luck on the rest of your touring season.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Holyn Handley with the Upshot.